The wrong relationship won't just cost you time, it will rewire your self-worth. And by the time you realize it, you won't be heartbroken, you'll be hollow. Welcome back to part 2. If you're here, it means you've seen what happens when connection is mistaken for completion. When love is chased before self-respect is earned. When being chosen feels like salvation until you realize it was actually surrender. This isn't about cynicism. It's about vision, about the kind of brutal clarity that comes only after you've spent enough time alone to recognize the difference between being wanted and being respected. And that's what we're diving into today. Because solitude doesn't just sharpen you, it reveals the kinds of compromises you'll never make again. If you're ready for this kind of conversation, like, share, and subscribe to Victory Stoic. This is where we cut through illusion, not to destroy love, but to purify it. Comment 1 if this topic hits home. Comment 0 if it doesn't land for you. Your response shapes what we do next. If you've lived through this, tell us your story. The moment you woke up, the decision you made to stop performing. That story is not just valuable, it might be the mirror someone else is searching for. This series marks a turning point. From now on, we're not only drawing from the ancient fire of Stoicism, but crossing its wisdom with the insights of modern psychology. Specifically, the work of Dr. Jordan Peterson, a man whose observations on identity, responsibility, and meaning echo the hard truth of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca. Together, they form a framework not for avoiding life, but for mastering it. Not for rejecting love, but for refusing the kind that demands your self-betrayal. The following lessons will sting, but they're meant to, because you don't grow by avoiding discomfort, you grow by walking into it armed with the truth. We're going deep into the mindset of the person who doesn't fear being alone, who no longer negotiates their standards, who sees love not as a need, but as a deliberate, earned, and sacred choice. And when that shift happens, everything changes. Not just how you date, but how you live, lead, and stand. Stay with us. What comes next may not be easy to hear, but it will be honest. And if you're strong enough to listen, it just might set you free. Number 6. You are the captain now. So stop blaming the weather. If your life is a sinking ship, it's probably time to check who's been steering it, and stop yelling at the clouds. There's a sacred moment, usually sometime between your 3rd existential crisis and your 5th missed alarm, when you realize no one's coming to save you. Not your partner, not your parents, not your therapist, and certainly not the algorithm. That's when it hits. This is your mess, your map, your damn wheel. Welcome to radical responsibility. It's not glamorous, but it's the beginning of every real man's transformation. In the ancient world, Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it bluntly: you may not control all events, but you can control how you respond to them. That wasn't a self-help mantra. It was a war cry. The Stoics didn't believe in victimhood. They believed in agency. If something fell apart, they didn't ask who hurt them. They asked, what now? Jordan Peterson echoes this perfectly. In his words, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Why? Because if your dishes aren't done and your schedule's a joke, you have no business blaming your childhood, your ex, or your boss for why your life is off track. Responsibility is not a burden. It's a crown, and most people are too afraid to wear it. Now meet Darren, 39. Insurance adjuster, Charlotte, North Carolina. For years, he blamed everyone but himself for his stalled career, his flabby body, and the emotional landmine of a dating history he dragged behind him. His ex was too critical. His job didn't value him. The gym was too far. His life was a slow-motion shrug. Then, one day, after his second breakup in 18 months and a quiet panic attack in his car, he looked in the rearview mirror and said the most important sentence of his adult life: maybe it's me. That moment wasn't dramatic. There was no enlightenment playlist or magical sunrise, just the sickening, sobering realization that if he didn't change, nothing else would. That was the day Darren stopped being a passenger. From that point, he didn't overhaul his life. He adjusted the rudder, tiny degrees at a time. First, he got up 30 minutes earlier. Then he prepped his own meals. Read 10 pages a night. Showed up to the gym even when he didn't feel like it. Most importantly, he stopped explaining why his life was stuck and started owning every inch of it. Peterson says, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Darren took that to heart. He stopped scrolling for inspiration, stopped outsourcing discipline to YouTube monks and motivational reels. Instead, he focused on being 1% better, not because it was sexy, because it was his. That's the core of this lesson. No one's life is shaped by fairness. It's shaped by ownership. You don't get points for being wounded. You get results for building something stronger from the wreckage. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The longer you blame others for your life, the longer you stay powerless to change it. And nothing keeps a man weak like the illusion that someone else is responsible for where he stands. Peterson's voice cuts through here again. Weak men are dangerous. Why? Because they deflect, collapse, and make others pay for the chaos they refuse to clean up. Responsibility is the antidote. It's what Stoicism and modern psychology both agree on. Your power begins the moment you stop negotiating with blame. Imagine your life as a ship, one with a rusty hull, a cracked compass, and no crew. You've drifted, yes, maybe even crashed a few times, but now you're standing on the deck. Alone, no one's coming. The sea doesn't care how tired you are. So what do? You grab the wheel. You set a course. You take the wind as it comes. You fix what breaks. You move. Here's a tip. For 1 week, write down every complaint you have about your life. Then, next to each one, write the action you could take to change it. Even if it's uncomfortable, unfair, or slow, don't filter it. Just write. At the end of the week, look at your list. It won't be a therapy session. It'll be a blueprint. Darren did this. On day 4, he wrote, "My boss doesn't respect me. Start showing up earlier, speak less, execute more. I hate my body. Track what I eat. Lift 3 times a week, no alcohol emth. Women don't take me seriously. Stop dating until I respect myself again." That list hit like a punch to the chest. But by the end of that week, something inside him had shifted. Not because the world changed, but because he finally believed he could. That's what this number is about. It's not motivational fluff. It's the reality that no one is coming to grant you clarity, strength, or purpose. You are the rescuer. You are the builder. You are the judge and the redeemer of your own fate. The reason this truth hurts is because it strips you of excuses. But the reason it frees you is because it gives you everything else. So next time life feels unfair, ask yourself, what am I choosing right now? Control or complaint? You can't have both, and only one of them will build the life you say you want. Responsibility is not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause, but it does come with peace. And peace, once earned, is a kind of power no one can manipulate. You are the captain now, so stop blaming the storm, adjust your sails, and sail better. Number 7, solitude makes you unshakable, and that's why they can't control you anymore. The most dangerous man in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who doesn't flinch when ignored, doesn't chase when rejected, and doesn't explain himself just to feel understood. He's not detached, he's sovereign. He spent enough time alone to know the difference between connection and control, between affection and manipulation, between being loved and being used. And the longer you stay single by choice, the more you become him. See, when you've been alone long enough to meet yourself, to sit with your silence, to rebuild your worth from the inside out, you no longer hand out your peace like it's a coupon for validation. You stop making your nervous system available to other people's emotional instability. You stop confusing obligation with virtue. You stop saying yes when your body screams no. You become, as the Stoics would call it, apatheia, not numb, but composed, not unfeeling, but unrattled. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." He didn't mean pretend you're invincible. He meant learn to govern your reactions so completely that other people's chaos has nowhere to land inside you. Their drama hits the wall of your self-possession and slides off like water on stone. This isn't natural. This is forged, and it's forged in solitude. Because when you're single, truly single, not distracted, not browsing, not halfway tethered to someone who doesn't deserve you, you stop outsourcing emotional regulation. You learn to hold space for discomfort, for disappointment, for nights that are quiet and mornings that no one texts you. You learn not to fill the void with people who only increase the void once they're in your bed. You also learn who you are without the performance, without tailoring your tone, your habits, your schedule, your identity to someone else's expectations. And once you've lived that kind of internal stability, manipulation becomes laughably transparent. Jordan Peterson puts it sharply. You're not good if you can't say no, you're just obedient. Most people equate niceness with goodness, but a man who can't say no doesn't have boundaries, he has anxiety. And manipulators can smell it. They don't respect kindness, they exploit it. What they can't handle is clarity, the calm, unmoved presence of someone who refuses to play their game. Let's talk about Jack. He's 44, owns a home repair business in Oregon. A few years ago, he found himself constantly drained, not by work, but by the relationships he kept attracting. High maintenance, emotionally volatile, passive-aggressive, women who wanted a therapist, not a partner. Every conflict ended the same way. Jack apologizing for being too distant, too logical, not emotionally available. But it was never about logic, it was about control. Then Jack stopped dating, not because he gave up, but because he realized he'd never actually known what it felt like to be centered, without emotional chaos buzzing around him. The silence was brutal at first, then clarifying, then addictive. A year later, someone tried the old tactics on him. She flirted, then punished, smiled, then withdrew, tested, then cried. He didn't argue, didn't lean in, didn't chase. He said calmly, "I'm not the kind of man who responds to that. If you want clarity, I'm here. If not, good night." She didn't text back. He slept just fine. That's the shift. When you've trained your nervous system in solitude, you no longer bend to keep the peace. You are the peace, and manipulators can't thrive in an environment they can't control. Seneca once said, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." That's not a quote for Instagram, it's a blueprint. The man who's alone but not lonely, clear but not cold, kind but not naive, that man cannot be shaped by flattery, guilt, or rage. He is steady, which makes him rare. And to the emotionally unstable, terrifying. Here's a tip. Anytime someone tries to pull you into emotional conflict, ask yourself 2 questions before responding. 1. Is this mine to fix? 2. Will explaining myself improve anything or just reset the trap? Most manipulation works because you believe silence is failure. It isn't. Sometimes silence is sovereignty. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. That's why solitude matters. Not because it makes you better than others, but because it makes you harder to program. When you don't fear being alone, no one can dangle connection over your head like bait. When your peace isn't for sale, no one can buy their way into your life with charm and excuses. Jack now lives with his boundaries carved into granite. He doesn't ghost, he doesn't lash out, he just refuses to be moved by tactics. He's not unavailable, he's unshakable. And that's the lesson. You don't become impossible to manipulate by reading quotes. You become that man by sitting through your own storms, training your mind, refining your habits, and building a life where losing someone doesn't mean losing yourself. Manipulators only have power when your identity is up for negotiation, when your self-worth is tied to their reaction, when silence terrifies you more than disrespect. Solitude strips you of that weakness. Not immediately, not comfortably, but completely. So if you're walking this road, single, clear, choosing not to settle, know this: you are becoming someone who can no longer be twisted, baited, or broken by false affection. You are becoming someone who knows the cost of peace and refuses to rent it out again. And when the world finally realizes they can't control you anymore, they'll call you many things: cold, distant, detached. Let them. That's just the sound of manipulation losing its grip. Because the truth is simple: you're not cold. You're not distant, you're finally free. Number 8. The day he stopped asking his feelings for permission. It happened on a Thursday, late morning. Rain tapping against the windows like a metronome set to anxiety. Michael, 42, sat at his desk in Chicago staring at 2 job offers, one from a large corporate firm that promised security and boredom, the other from a fast-growing startup with risk, chaos, and potential. He had been stewing over the decision for 5 days, polling friends, watching motivational clips, flipping coins in his mind. But none of it moved him forward. Every time he got close to a choice, a flood of emotion pulled him back. What if I fail? What if I regret it? What will they think? What if I choose wrong and it says something permanent about who I am? So he did what most people do. He waited for clarity to feel good. That was his mistake. We're taught to believe emotions are the compass for every decision worth making, that a choice should feel right. That doubt means don't. That fear is wisdom. But fear can't tell the future. It only remembers the past. And doubt? Doubt is often just your nervous system reacting to risk, not evaluating it. That Thursday, something snapped in Michael. Not with drama, but with exhaustion. He realized he had spent most of his adult life outsourcing decisions to his feelings. Feelings that came and went like weather. Feelings shaped by his blood sugar, by someone else's tone, by the lighting in the room. And he was done. He took a breath, opened a blank page, and wrote 2 columns. Facts and feelings. Under facts, he listed the data. Salary, commute, company stability, learning opportunities. Under feelings, he wrote things like nervous, flattered, uncertain, hopeful. Then he drew a line through the second column and whispered, "You're not in charge today." That was the first truly Stoic decision of his life. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." He didn't say, "If it feels right," he said, "is." Stoicism draws a hard, necessary line between what is objectively useful and what is subjectively soothing. The more time you spend alone, the more you start to see how often your emotions are just echoes, not signals. They don't guide you toward truth. They beg for comfort. Michael chose the startup. It didn't feel heroic. It didn't feel comfortable, but it was the right move for his growth. 6 months later, he was managing a team, learning faster than ever, and sleeping better. Not because everything was perfect, but because he had stopped asking his emotions to carry the weight of adult decisions. Here's the shift. When you've been alone long enough, you stop panicking in the presence of uncertainty. You stop waiting for the right feeling before acting. You start training yourself to see clearly, act decisively, and tolerate the discomfort of not being instantly validated. Jordan Peterson says, "You have to negotiate with yourself as if you were someone you were responsible for helping." That means treating your emotions not as masters, but as advisors. Not ignoring them, but not obeying them either. You listen, but you make the final call with your rational mind. There's a cognitive foundation for this. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, functions best when not flooded with emotion. That's why people in high-stress relationships or emotionally chaotic environments often report brain fog. Their logic is hijacked. Constantly. The solitude Michael chose wasn't just social, it was neurological hygiene. Space for his brain to breathe. This doesn't mean you become robotic, it means you become strategic. You learn to pause between trigger and response. You create a gap between emotion and execution. You build the muscle of emotional separation. Just because I feel it doesn't mean I follow it. Michael now uses a simple tool, one you can try, the 3 filters method. When facing a decision, he asks 1, what are the facts? 2, what are my fears? 3, what is my first responsible action, regardless of how I feel? This approach doesn't numb him. It arms him. It keeps his actions aligned with values, not moods. And that's what makes a man formidable. Not that he doesn't feel, but that he doesn't wait to feel good to do what's right. One day, a former colleague reached out to Michael, venting about a toxic relationship, saying she felt stuck. Michael asked what she knew was true. She replied that he lies, manipulates, and avoids accountability. Then he asked, "What are you waiting to feel before you leave?" She was silent. That's the moment most people break. When they realize they're not trapped by circumstances, but by their refusal to move without emotional permission. Solitude strips that need away. It teaches you to act not from relief but from principle, not from comfort but from clarity. Michael's life isn't perfect, but it's his. And every decision since that rainy Thursday has followed the same rule. Facts first, feelings second, freedom always. So if you're reading this and still waiting for your heart to know, try this instead. Trust your reason. Trust the patterns. Trust the part of you that already sees what needs to happen, even if your emotions aren't ready to applaud. The day you stop asking your feelings for permission is the day you start making real progress. Not impulsive, not emotional, just free. Number 9. Build a value system so solid, society can't bribe you with approval or scare you with shame. If you're still watching this video, first, thank you. And second, comment 9 below so I know you're still with me. It means more than you think. This one matters. Because what we're about to talk about isn't popular. It won't trend. It won't go viral. But it will change your life. if you're strong enough to live it. Let's begin with a question no one asks. What if everything they told you to chase was designed to keep you obedient, not fulfilled? Think about it. The car, the marriage, the mortgage, the smiling couple on Instagram, the carefully filtered vacation, the job with a title no one understands but pays enough to keep you distracted. You weren't just given goals, you were given scripts. Scripts designed to make you predictable, manageable, safe. And most people never question them. They sprint toward someone else's dream and call it success. They sacrifice clarity for conformity and call it maturity. They do what's expected and call it being responsible. But then there's you. Or at least, the version of you that Solitude has been slowly carving out like a statue under all the noise. And that version no longer bends at the knee every time society waves its golden carrot. That version has started to realize, if your values aren't chosen, they're implanted. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." That's not just poetic. That's a direct assault on the shallow metrics we've been trained to worship: money, likes, applause, being good on paper. To build your own value system means becoming terrifyingly honest with yourself. It means you stop chasing enough, because you've defined what enough looks like. And no billboard, politician, influencer, or parent gets to rewrite it. Let me introduce you to Evan. He's 47, a software architect in Austin. From the outside, he looked like a model of adulting. House, kids, respectable job, competent wife, good teeth. But underneath it all, hollow. Not because he lacked things, but because he had never chosen them. Everything in his life had been inherited, not biologically, but culturally. The Ivy League path. The white picket fence. The polite dinner parties where everyone pretended their marriages weren't dead behind the eyes. One night, after another networking event where he laughed at jokes he didn't find funny, Evan went home, poured a drink, and asked himself out loud, "What the hell am I actually living for?" That night didn't fix anything. But it was the beginning of Evan's reconstruction. Quietly, without fanfare, he began extracting values he had borrowed and replacing them with principles he'd earned. He wrote them down. Here are a few. I value depth over appearances. I value peace over performance. I value relationships that feed my clarity, not my ego. I value time over trophies. And then he did something radical. He started aligning his actions to them. He turned down a promotion that would have doubled his income, but killed his time with his kids. He stopped attending social gatherings out of obligation. He told his wife the truth, and eventually they separated. Not out of hate, but because they were both actors in a play neither wanted to be in anymore. Evan didn't blow up his life. He reclaimed it. Jordan Peterson says, "You should be someone you can respect. Not someone others find agreeable. Not someone who pleases everyone. Someone who at the end of the day you can look in the mirror and say, you didn't lie today." Building a value system is brutal because it exposes how often you've lived a life designed by fear, not freedom. How often you've said yes when you meant no. How often you've traded alignment for approval. But once you start, even in small ways, something wild happens. The world gets louder, trying to pull you back. Friends guilt you, family questions you, culture mocks you. But inside, you get quieter, not passive, certain. And certainty is a currency no one else can print. Here's a practice. This week, write down 5 values you want your life to reflect. Not buzzwords, values. Then next to each, write one behavior that either proves or betrays it. For example, when you claim to value freedom, yet you work 80 hours a week just to buy a car that impresses strangers you don't even know, you're not honoring your values, you're betraying them. When you say you value honesty, but you tell people "I'm fine" while quietly falling apart inside, you're not being strong, you're being false to yourself. And when you say you value growth, yet you stay in a relationship that slowly erodes your spirit, your potential, and your sense of self, you aren't being loyal, you're abandoning your own evolution. Betrayal doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it's in the quiet ways we turn our backs on what we say we believe in. This list won't make you feel good, it will make you see. And that's the point. Because once your values are real, chosen, lived, defended, you become unmarketable to every system that profits off your confusion. You can't be guilted into staying, flattered into silence, or scared into playing along. Back to Evan. 3 years later, he lives in a modest apartment, sees his kids more than ever, works fewer hours, writes daily, and hasn't posted anything online in 2 years. He doesn't feel behind. He feels clean. He once said, "I'm finally living a life I don't have to explain." And that's the goal, isn't it? Not to be admired, but to be aligned. So if you're still chasing things that don't feel right, ask yourself, whose story am I living? And if the answer isn't yours, start over. Write your own code, live by it, bleed for it, and never again apologize for the quiet power that comes from finally knowing what you stand for. Number 10. The quiet power that doesn't beg to be understood, but is always felt. He never raised his voice. He didn't chase attention, didn't flirt like a salesman, didn't flood the room with charisma or perform confidence like a stand-up act. He just stood there, quiet, grounded, fully present. And somehow, without saying a word, everyone felt it. This man is not trying to prove a damn thing. That's the kind of man people remember without knowing why. The kind of man others feel safe around, especially in a world built on noise, ego, and fragile performance. He doesn't need applause. He doesn't crave validation. He doesn't scan the room to measure how liked he is, because he's already anchored, already whole, already home. And that kind of presence, it's magnetic, but not loud. It's not the glow of the extrovert or the seduction of the smooth talker. It's the deep, solid gravity of someone who's made peace with who they are and no longer asks strangers to hold that peace together for them. This is the story of Sam. Sam is 48, runs a small woodcraft business in Vermont. No Instagram, no fancy branding, no personal brand. Just hand-carved chairs, honest prices, and a shop that smells like cedar and sweat. He lives alone in a cabin he built himself. Not because he hates people, but because he likes clarity. Years ago, Sam was the opposite, the kind of man who tried to be liked in every room. At work, he over-delivered. In relationships, he over-explained. He was dependable, agreeable, and slowly invisible. Because the more he tried to be enough for others, the more he became a shadow of himself. His relationships always started the same. Big emotion, fast attachment, promises made in candlelight. And then, the same erosion. The same fights about why he was distant, why he didn't open up, why he couldn't just talk more. So he tried, he softened, he shared more. And every time it backfired. Because he wasn't built to perform intimacy on demand. His silence wasn't coldness, it was focus. His stillness wasn't avoidance, it was control. One day, after yet another breakup where he was told he just wasn't enough emotionally, Sam did something radical. He stopped chasing compatibility, stopped trying to match expectations that felt like a cage. He didn't swear off love. He just decided, next time, if it happens while I'm standing still, not bending. And then came the change. Not overnight, over years. In solitude, he didn't become bitter, he became clear. He didn't isolate, he refined. He built his body, his business, his routines, and most of all, his presence. Not for anyone, for himself. The man who used to explain everything to be understood became the man who said almost nothing, and yet was understood more than ever. That's the paradox. The quieter he got, the more people leaned in. Customers returned not just for the chairs, but for the feeling they had while in his shop. His employees said they felt calmer around him. Even strangers noticed. One woman told him, "I don't know why, but I feel like I can breathe when I'm near you." He smiled, said nothing. This is the kind of man modern culture can't explain. He doesn't posture, doesn't chase, doesn't brag, but he's solid. And people feel it. In his walk, his eyes, his timing. He's not trying to impress, so he never overextends. He's not afraid of silence, so he listens better. He doesn't need love, so when he offers it, it's clean. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Sam became that. Quietly. Unapologetically. And the strangest thing happened. The women who once called him too distant were now drawn to him like moths to fire. But he didn't burn for anyone anymore. Because here's the kicker. When a man truly becomes that grounded, his standards evolve. Not just in love, but in life. He's no longer seduced by beauty without depth, charm without character, passion without peace, because he knows what he's built inside, and he won't trade it for chaos wearing lipstick. People call that picky. He calls it being awake. Jordan Peterson once said, "You must become a monster and then learn to control it." But the second part matters more. It's not enough to be strong. You must be disciplined in your strength, restrained in your fire, still in your storm. That's what Sam had become. Dangerous, but never chaotic. That's why people felt safe near him. Not because he was soft, but because he was sovereign. Here's a practice if you're listening. For 1 week, say less. Not in silence, but in intentional speech. Let your words mean more because you use them less. Let your eyes say what your mouth doesn't need to. Sit in discomfort without reacting. And when someone tries to provoke you, don't perform. Just be. People will feel it. They won't know what it is, but they'll want to be near it. Back to Sam. One day, a woman walked into his shop, not looking for furniture, just exploring. They talked. Nothing forced, no games. She didn't try to crack his silence, and he didn't feel the need to fill hers. She came back. Then again. Months later, they were sharing coffee on his porch in complete quiet. No declarations, no questions about where this is going. Just peace. That's when Sam realized something he never would have believed years earlier. The right person doesn't need you to perform peace. They just want to sit in it with you. So if you're building yourself in solitude, refining your center, and wondering why people seem more drawn to you than ever, don't be surprised. True stability is rare, and in a collapsing world, people can smell it like firewood in winter. But here's the catch. Once you become that man, you can't unsee your own depth. You can't unfeel the price it took to get here. And you won't trade it, not for casual attention, not for surface-level flings, not even for a pretty face with no foundation underneath. That's not arrogance, that's stewardship. You've built something real inside, and the world will feel it, even if you never say a word. So stay quiet, stay sharp, stay rooted. Because in a world of noise, the man who doesn't flinch becomes the man no one can forget. Conclusion: you don't find yourself by being with someone, you find yourself by surviving your own silence. They said you'd be lonely. That if you stayed single too long, you'd get weird, bitter, hard to love. What they didn't tell you was the truth. You'd get clear. So clear that most noise feels intolerable. So solid that most games look childish. So rooted that the idea of giving your peace away for chemistry feels like a scam you've already fallen for. Once. This isn't about rejecting love. It's about refusing to crawl for it. Because love, when you're still starving for it, becomes survival. But when you've learned to cook alone, to sit with silence, to build yourself from the ground up, love becomes choice. Clean, slow, dangerous in its depth. And until you've lived without it, you're not ready to hold it. Stoicism never told you to avoid affection. It told you to stop being owned by it, to make yourself unshakable first. Then decide who, if anyone, is allowed to stand beside that strength. Marcus Aurelius didn't hate love, he just refused to be enslaved by longing. Jordan Peterson echoes this in a different voice. Don't ever sacrifice who you could be for who someone else needs you to be. You've felt that sacrifice before, haven't you? The self-abandonment, the performance, the need to be enough for someone who was never even clear about what they wanted. Enough. Enough of that. This long road of solitude, it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Every quiet night, every unresolved text, every event you walked into alone, it all carved out something irreplaceable. A spine, a system, a soul that doesn't shapeshift just to be touched. And now, you're not waiting to be chosen. You're choosing, not from fear, but from fullness. So let them misunderstand your quiet. Let them call your standards too high. Let them assume you're hiding. You're not. You're building a life so true, it no longer requires explanation. If this message hit something in you, if it made you pause or made you exhale, like, share, and subscribe to Victory Stoic. This isn't therapy. This is strategy for the soul. Comment 1 if this resonated. Comment 0 if it didn't. Either way, you were here and that matters. And if you're willing, share your story. Tell us about your silence, your moment of enough. The first time you realized being alone wasn't a failure, it was freedom. Your comment might be what someone else needs to survive their own silence. Thank you for being here. And if you're still walking this road alone, keep going. The destination isn't love, it's sovereignty. And once you have that, you'll never love out of lack again, only out of abundance.